The update to one of the best built phones of last year tries to capture the same aluminum-clad buzz of the original, with a slightly taller form, an extra eye on its back, and an updated experience underneath. Does the new HTC One live up to that promise? Well, that's exactly what we're about to find out, because it's Joshua Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And this is our full review of the HTC One M8. In an update to the original, the metal has now been wrapped around the phone, eliminating the polycarbonate that used to comprise the sides. The hairline brushed metal finish looks very nice on this gray version, but if you don't like it, there are matted finishes on the silver and gold versions that are available. Coming around to the front, bumping up the screen size to 5 inches does stretch the phone a little bit, but there's more to the tallness than what meets the eye. The boom sound speakers return here and comprise that top and bottom of the M8, accompanied by that 5-megapixel front-facing camera. Yes, there is that black bar on the bottom that simply says HTC. There are no more capacitive keys, as soft keys are now used in the new version of Sense. I did ask about this bar, and HTC told us that it's there simply because there's a lot going on underneath, so room had to be made here, just like in the original. And the sides, as I mentioned already, are completely metallic because the metal has been wrapped around. And while the volume rockers are on the right side, the power button is still up top, which might be a little odd to some users. And then finally, the only prominent area of polycarbonate is up top, and that is where the infrared sensor is located. So without a doubt, you have a very attractive device, but what does that mean for the handling? Well, honestly, that is another highlight of the build quality, as I found that despite the extra girth in the screen and the overall construction at the top and bottom at the very least, the handling of the M8 is actually quite easy. Metal phones tend to slip about in my hand more easily, but in this case the rounded metal sides helped with the grip, eliminating the rigidity that was previously uncomfortable in the original HTC One. And despite the phone being quite tall, one of the most important aspects of the handling experience, typing, was helped by the narrow profile, so when using the phone in one hand, you can still reach the other side of the screen without much trouble at all. Speaking of that screen, the same good performing Super LCD3 screen returns in this version of the HTC One, this time boosted up to a 5-inch size and retaining the 1080p resolution with 441 pixels per inch. Sense 6 is taking on a more colorful motif all around, and thankfully this screen really does it justice. Colors do shine quite well, and is helped by the above average contrast, as these colors are alongside Sense's darker elements. Viewing angles are also really great, with the color fidelity remaining even at very steep angles. Now, while I didn't really complain about the 4.7-inch size of the original screen, moving to the 5-inch screen territory does help the phone handle everything even better. Games especially, as I had a great time playing games like Anomaly Korea on this vivid performer. Now, it should come as no surprise that this flagship device comes with the latest and greatest processing package. The Snapdragon 801 clocked in at 2.3 GHz, backed by the Adreno 330 and 2 GB of RAM. Now, while there's no doubt about the power of this processor, the ability of the HTC One M8 to absolutely fly through its elements should also give credit to the updated version of Sense. Now, while we'll get more in-depth into the software a little bit later, what I can tell you is that HTC has really streamlined their user interface, and they've really clued into what is now my new user experience philosophy. When you keep it simple, you keep it fast. While you can head over to the full written review of the HTC One M8 at AndroidAuthority.com to see the benchmarking results, I can tell you from my experience right now that you should be able to get everything you need done, whether it's work or play, very easily on this flagship phone. Well, we already talked about the build quality of the phone due to the well-done aluminum design, but there is quite a bit underneath the surface that adds to the experience further. Versions of the M8 are available for all major carriers, so you will be able to get this phone for your LTE or otherwise powered networks, no problem at all. One of the biggest additions that users usually pine over is expandable storage, and the 16 or 32 gigabytes already built in can be added to with the micro SD card slot found near the volume rockers. And of course, we have the boom sound speakers, which return from the original HTC One, and this time around HTC has further amplified these speakers to give 25% more volume and even richer mids and lows. Now let me tell you, they really do the job, and even when you're outside, it's not hard to hear what you're playing, and thus sharing media with your friends is best on this phone compared to pretty much any other one out there. Phone calls came in nice and clear, as to be expected, with no drops and strong signals all around. But I find myself using the boom sound speakers for my calls more often than not. And finally, in battery, the capacity might not immediately turn heads as you get a 2600 mAh unit in the M8, but it manages to last quite a long time. In very specific instances, I found that even after heavy usage for, let's say, playing music for extended periods of time, using the camera for an entire day, like I did for my camera shootout feature focus, I found that I was getting home and didn't feel the pressure to get to a plug right away, even at the end of the day. Power saving features are available, especially the super power saving mode that strips the phone down to its bare essentials and can get you 15 extra hours of standby time for your final 5% of battery life. Unfortunately, it is not available on the Western versions of the phone at the moment because the carriers are still trying to approve it for their versions of the HTC One M8. That's a little bit of a bummer. And then it's in the camera experience that you might find some conflicting information. After all, the rear-facing shooter is the same 4 ultra-pixel performer that is now backed by a 5-megapixel front-facing camera. Well, in any case, the low-light performance was the point of the ultra-pixel, but in this iteration, HTC wanted the more daylight shots to have a better focus and better exposure and coloration all around. But the streamlining of the Sense UI app is the first thing you find, and it continues in the camera, which has a much simpler interface this time around, truly geared for the average user. You have an elegantly presented menu for the various modes, for example. What is actually really great about the camera app is the level of manual control you find if you dive even a little bit deeper into the interface. Controls for ISO and exposure compensation are available aside other modes like the sweeping panorama. You can also set the volume buttons to have other functions like being the shutter, which is the one that I would recommend. Photo quality, if you haven't already seen my camera shootout, is pretty much decent at best, as you can get pretty great looking shots sometimes, but most other times there is a lack of dynamic range, adding to often washed out elements, and in all cases, zooming into a photo shows you the limitation of a low megapixel camera. Now the video capabilities are actually quite good, but without stabilization you will have to use some steady hands. But what I can say is that in video the audio capture is actually really good, as you probably heard from the intro and outro of, again, my camera shootout. The Zoes are still quite fun to use and allow you to put your own music into the resulting highlight reel, and then also using this new Zoe app you can share your Zoes out to the cloud. So those of you who are nostalgic will be able to make nice memories using this phone. But of course the main story here is the addition of the Duo camera, found at the very top of the device on the back, and helps the main camera by gathering depth information in every shot you take. The main benefit is getting a selective focus effect without wasting time by making the camera take multiple photos. And after you take your photo, you just have to go into the gallery in order to mess with your shot. It doesn't work in every single situation, as you cannot use it for pictures with flash or in super low light situations, so in that regard it is a little bit of a hit or miss. But every effect afforded these pictures brings some style to shots, either from the U-focus or from additions like the colorization and the foregrounder that is found in the gallery app. But it's pretty obvious that some optimization is still needed here, as often the software doesn't perfectly capture the focal point. And in these very common instances, you can pretty much see the line that was drawn to create the effect that you've picked. Especially if you like to post smartphone captured photos onto places like social media like Facebook or even Instagram, you'll find a lot to like in this camera because it gives you some freedom to create stylized shots. But it is when you want to delve into the world of photography a little bit more that you will realize just how limited the experience is on the HTC One M8. And finally, in software, we have a new version of Sense based on Android KitKat, and in the case of the M8, this means optimization and speed. For any Sense veterans out there, much of what you remember from earlier versions of Sense remains here. For example, the vertical elements and movements in both Blink Feed and the app drawer, the generally dark motif of Sense, but it's now predicated with more color elements to signify different parts of the experience, and finally, Blink Feed itself has actually been enhanced. Now there is some freedom that the user is afforded to change the look of the UI, like through the theme section that will continue to grow in the coming months. Enhancements include the new notification drop-down power widget, which is tiled and gives easy access to quick settings, and also the soft keys, like I already mentioned, bring that wonderful addition of the new recent apps button. And then there are the motion launch gestures, which use the sensors to know when you bring a phone up to your face, after which time you are able to perform a few swipes or presses on the screen to wake and unlock the phone. The main ones to use are the swipe up to wake and unlock the device to the most recent screen, and the camera launch, where you have the phone in a horizontal position and you press down the volume down button in order to go straight to the camera. And finally, there is Blink Feed, which has been enhanced and will continue to be enhanced with the new focus on developer editions. What was once a paginated layout is now a perfect scroll that uses tiles. Content might mostly be curated by HTC, but there is a large slew of sources to choose from, including social media outlets. And ultimately, it's a good way of looking at your feeds without too much fuss at all, especially considering the ease by which you can hunker down to only the source you want to read, which is a valuable feature. For a much more in-depth look at Blink Feed specifically, I did a feature-focused video that you can check out. That will be linked at the end of this video and in the description below. Ultimately, it comes down to one main selling point. Sense is fast, and it's one of the easier Android iterations to navigate. Plus, its style is predicated by undeniable function. The HTC One M8 is available now on all of the major carriers in the US for the premium price on 2-year contracts, and that's usually around $199 up front. However, you can find unlocked versions of this phone at major retailers online for $649. And so, there you have it, the HTC One M8. While many people out there might expect the world of this year's slew of flagship updates, we have to remember the operative word: update. And the HTC One M8 is an example of a proper evolutionary step. By focusing on the general user experience, HTC has crafted a stylish device that not only appeals to previous fans of the One, but provides an accessibly attractive package for any new user. While the camera might be the only wrinkle in an otherwise great overall package, it is far from a deal breaker. And what you end up getting in the M8 is a phone that I will plainly say I had a lot of fun using on the daily. So as always, thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this review of the HTC One M8. It is one hell of a start to all of the updates we're going to be seeing this year, and I'm excited to see where all of them go. So for all of the best coverage of those upcoming flagships and beyond, stay tuned to Android Authority's YouTube channel, drop us likes on our videos because we love to see those thumbs up, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. You can see the feature-focused videos that I did on the HTC One M8 right over there, so make sure you check those out for even more in-depth coverage. But for even more in-depth coverage after that, make sure you head on over to AndroidAuthority.com because we are your source for all things Android.